Welcome to the review of Wizardry 8. Wizardry 8 was created by Surtech Canada and released in 2001. It is the final official Wizardry ever created. Linda Curry is credited as the producer of Wizardry 8, and Brenda Brathwaite was the lead game designer. David W. Bradley did not work on Wizardry 8. He did, of course, create Wizardry 6, which is Bane of the Cosmic Forge, and Wizardry 7, Crusaders of the Dark Savant. Wizardry 8 continues with that trilogy. If you haven't watched my reviews on Wizardry 6 and 7, I recommend doing so before watching this review. Also, I'm going to try to keep spoilers to a minimum. However, there will be a few. There are actually 5 possible beginnings to this game if you transfer characters from Wizardry 7, depending on what you did there. And as the former Wizardries, there's also multiple endings. So let's begin the review. The main screen gives you a few options: Introduction, Start a new game, Load an existing game, View the credits, or Change options. So in order to let Wizardry speak for itself, since it can do a much better job than I can, sit back for a 3-minute introduction to the story of this game.
Before the beginning, the Cosmic Lords crafted 3 artifacts. First was the Astral Domine, infused with the power of life itself. Next, the Chaos Moleri, source of all change. Last was the Destiny Dominus, containing all knowledge. The Lords created the very first world using these artifacts, Planet Dominus, and placed it next to the Cosmic Circle. When the work of creation was finished, the Lords hid the items using the Cosmic Forge, and so their secrets remained hidden for a time. Then the unthinkable happened. The Cosmic Forge was stolen. The magic concealing the 3 items failed. News of the artifacts spread throughout the countless worlds. With it spread an even more unbelievable rumor. Whoever obtains all 3 will gain the powers of the Cosmic Lords. The Astral Domine was first of the 3 to be found. Hidden on a remote world, it was the subject of a bitter war between the militant Umpane, the devious Trang, and the Dark Savant. In the end, the Dark Savant gained the Astral Domine. Within it, he found a map pointing to Dominus. The Chaos Moleri was discovered half a galaxy away. The Mook found the device when it tore through a nearby moon with unbelievable force. When the Mook recovered the object, they too discovered a map. The Destiny Dominus collected dust in a remote monastery on Dominus for uncounted years, its true powers concealed with magic writ by the Forge. But the Destiny Dominus is no longer there. A madman named Martin stole it, they say. And Martin has vanished. A new age is about to begin. A new page will be written in the Book of Fate. It is the time of the Ascension and the dawning of a new destiny. Who will prove worthy? Who will become Cosmic Lords themselves?
So the first part of the process is creating your 6 characters, or less if you choose. It carries on with David W. Bradley's vision of the numerous professions and races of the game. In fact, the electronic manual shows all the races, has little sketches, describes the advantages and disadvantages to each, and is very well done. Same goes for the professions. One big twist with Wizardry 8 is each profession actually gets some type of unique ability or benefit, which is, in my opinion, fantastic. Definitely adds to the series by doing this. Wizardry 8 has streamlined the character creation process. Instead of waiting for a random number to determine the profession, you can choose the profession and the race combination you want, and it tells you how many bonus points you get. In fact, it's even possible to have negative bonus points, which will affect your level ups in the future. But essentially, the number of bonus points then can be applied to your attributes, which also have a few changes. It's no longer using the Dungeons & Dragons 18 maximum limit. Stats can go up to 75 normally. Your profession then determines if it can reach the maximum of 100. Items and other things that we will discuss later can actually push it beyond that to 125 plus. So of course, like the previous wizardries, there's skills. Again, these have been updated and changed. Also, like Wizardry 7, you can pick the portrait for your character. Very nicely done graphics. You also give your character a full name and nickname, and the best of all,
some believe I can speak with animals, but it is they who communicate with me.
you choose your personality.
All right then. But look here. I know what's what, so don't try to pull anything.
There's a wide variety of personalities and voices you can choose from. This is a great aspect of the game.
Very well. Our enemies shall feel my wrath.
It makes you feel like you're journeying with real party members.
Right then, I join you as soon as I finish milking the cows and gelding the bulls.
This is a fantastic feature that Brenda introduced to Wizardry 8. There's only a few drawings for each race-sex combination, but they're very well done. Most of the voices go pretty well with the majority of portraits too, which has to be a very difficult thing to pull off.
Who can make the muddy water clear? Let the water be still, and it will become clear.
Some professions, of course, get spells, and it brings back the same mechanism used in Wizardry 7. There's different realms of magic. In fact, any magic resistance applies to these realms. That applies to the characters as well as your enemies. Characters also have spell points and skills related to each realm. It determines how effectively you can cast the spells based on their power level and the chance of fizzling or backfiring. You can also transfer characters from Wizardry 7. As I mentioned earlier, your beginning will be different depending on what you did in Wizardry 7, which is a really cool feature. You then choose your difficulty level, including Iron Man game, which essentially means you cannot save the game when you want to. And the game begins. When you transfer your characters, you can level up all the way to level 5. And they bring forward some of their equipment and abilities, but it's much more limited than transferring from Wizardry 6 to Wizardry 7. The professions aren't 100% compatible between Wizardry 7 and 8, so you'll notice some differences in skills. Plus some skills are gone, like swimming and climbing. As I mentioned, some of your equipment will transfer, but it's much more limited. You cannot transfer powerful items like Excalibur, although they do exist in Wizardry 8. Although some of the items actually become better, such as the Mystery Ray. In Wizardry 7 that only worked against certain types of things, but in Wizardry 8, it actually can affect anything. You can bring forward the diamond ring that you found in Wizardry 6, which is awesome. You can change your profession in Wizardry 8 like you could in the predecessor. However, you can only do it when you're leveling up. The way class changes works is very different in Wizardry 8. In fact, in my opinion, it's better, because what it does is keeps your previous level for the other class, and you start over at level 1 with the new class. However, your main level remains a combination of both. Interestingly enough, if you abandon Vi Domina at the end of Wizardry 7, you cannot transfer those characters. That's a pretty cool touch. One thing you'll notice right away when beginning the game is the 3D world is smooth. There's the X, Y, Z coordinates now, instead of just the X, Y in a typical two-dimensional RPG. So here we're greeted by Vi Domina, who of course was in Wizardry 7. She gives us some advice and tells us that she'll meet us in Arnica.
The Dark Savant could be anywhere.
Beauty. Me skills be improving.
So the party members level up to 5 because I transferred them. And they got some pretty good equipment. Here I transferred with a stun rod. Excellent item to begin with. And of course, unlimited ammo in the mystery ray. So the stats screen is pretty darn awesome. I really like the layout. It's very intuitive and it gives you all kinds of information that the previous Wizardries did not. You have the ability to flip back and forth between characters very easily. There's a lot of hotkeys. For example, if you hold down the control button, it'll show you the names of all the items in the inventory. Very easy drag and drop interface for items. And just very well done in general. Also, there's many tooltips. If you either right click or hover over items, it generally gives more information. In fact, I played this game without even reading the manual. The interface was so intuitive. Each character has 3 bars, red meaning health or hit points, yellow stamina, and blue is spell points. You can also hover over and see their magic resistance. So right off the bat, you're presented with a treasure chest where you can grab the items and equip them from the inventory screen. So right off the bat, you'll notice that when you walk, it's smooth and that it's not giant steps forward like traditional RPGs. I wanted to show the first battle just to give a real quick feel of how it's going to go. Later on, I'll describe everything in detail. So as you can tell, it's turn-based by default, just like any other role-playing game. Monsters come forward, and when they get within range of a certain weapon or spell, they can be attacked. And of course, they can attack you as well. You instruct your party members to perform the actions you desire, and they talk back to you as you do so. Very cool and very nice touch. You can hear their war cries and pain when they get hit.
Understood. Imagine how well I'd do if I had all the...
And we already lost a party member. You'll be experiencing that a lot when you first start Wizardry 8, especially if you play on the default level. The world is quite large. It's very, very friendly to explore. You can look up and down. Of course, turn all the way around. You can even shuffle sideways. You'll be inside and outside. And you'll experience night and daytime. The graphics are quite beautiful in my opinion. Where it starts to fall short is when you get too close to something. Then the texture becomes obvious and it looks like a early 90s game. It has nice atmosphere, like a full moon in the background. You can hear sounds of footsteps. As you sloosh through water, you can hear it. You can even hear waterfalls or the sound of footsteps on metal. Just overall, it has a very nice feel while you're traveling and exploring. The game only loads certain regions or areas at a time, so as you reach another area, you're prompted whether you want to proceed or not. Here's an example of Arnica, the first town you typically find. The background music is very nice, very soothing. And just like the previous Wizardries, there's a good mix of futuristic type equipment and items, technology, and medieval. There's elevators you can ride. Here's a satellite dish. Here's a nice little space grid. Very cool. There are several ways for the environment to hurt you. You can fall and take damage, or sometimes fall much farther than that. Basically have an instant death. There's also areas where you can be killed by getting crushed inside a door. And there's an obstacle course at some point in the game where you get spiked. Which makes playing Iron Man very, very scary, because you cannot reload the game. Speaking of which, of course it has a save game and load game feature, and you can save many games. So now let's talk a little bit about the user interface. There's a concept of party order and where your party members are standing in battle. You can adjust that from the main screen. There's also what's called the radar menu on the bottom left. It shows you objects and things that are around you, including enemies. And you can click it to see the map. There's an auto map feature which works pretty darn well in the game. It occasionally has some glitches, but overall it works pretty darn well. You can center the mini-map on your party. You can add notes. There's even an ability to zoom up and down layers so that you can hide them depending on where you're at in the Z plane in the game. Eventually you may have a caster that can cast X-ray, and then when you look at the auto map it'll show things off areas where you haven't even been yet. Red indicates hostile, yellow is neutral, and green is friendly. As you explore, you'll stumble across set items that are always there, but the first time you play, you'd have no idea. That is one thing with Wizardry 8 that improves upon Wizardry 7, is it really feels like you're exploring, and you have to really keep a keen eye in order to find things. There are special items you'll run across in the game that either are required to produce another type of item or to make you progress onward, but the game is not very linear. You can do it pretty much the way you want.
What is that beast?
The party member quotes really helps bring the party alive.
The chase begins. Attack!
An object.
As you're exploring, they'll tell you when they run across something. There is a search mode for your party to try to look for random hidden items. If you have a ranger in your party, you don't need to even turn on search mode.
Something useful?
Automatic
Something
scouting.
Useful? Object.
Eventually you may get a Detect Secrets spell,
Look over there.
which automatically finds all items within the area.
There's something. Let's grab it.
The game does include modern type weapons or even a little historic like muskets, and when you go into the inventory screen you can right click to essay an item and see the details on it. Some weapons are one-handed or two-handed, just like in the previous Wizardries. And it'll show you all the special effects once the item's been identified. There's a lot of cool equipment in this game. I feel like there's not quite as much as Wizardry 6 and 7, but it does have a healthy share. And some items will only work for certain professions or certain races. So you just equip the items by dragging them and dropping them into the appropriate inventory slot. And incidentally, armor class goes up in this game instead of down to be more powerful. Sometimes it feels like you're in a click adventure because you're not sure what you need to be clicking on in order to make something happen. And sometimes you'll find little hints spread throughout the game on the walls or the floors. There's cool secrets like this house that's in the middle of the game ending up being a place where you can teleport to. And the first time you play you'd have no idea. It's locked and you can't get inside. But once you get to a certain area in the game, you can teleport into the house and then exit and it'll forever be unlocked. There's other cool secrets like writing that has capital letters meaning something special. There's code numbers sometimes on boxes, for example. Or subtle diagrams that you should pay attention to. There's quite a few secret passages in the game. Secret panels and walls, which incidentally, putting on level easy will help you find more often. There's secret doors that you have to trigger in some way. And you'll run across quite a few unpassable or unpickable gates. Not nearly as many as Wizardry 6 or 7, but there's still a good variety. You'll need special items sometimes to pass certain areas.
Verifying clearance. Access permitted. Motion sensors deactivated.
Or sometimes even operate a mechanical combination. Now sometimes it is kind of annoying that the keys that you have will not work. This is a little glitchy and then you have to move a certain position and then all of a sudden it works. I found that kind of irritating because I didn't know if I was using the wrong key or if I just wasn't positioned correctly. There are many areas in the game that you do not have to go to in order to complete, which is really cool. In fact, the second time I played through the game, I found quite a few places that I had never been. So it really helps with the replay value. You'll stumble across things like pools that will heal your party or restore magical energy. And you'll run across a bunch of old NPCs from the previous versions of Wizardry.
Oh, strange that my journey should end like
Remember
this.
Janet?
With you. I am from a Higadi colony, but he, the Dark Savant, shot our ship down.
And of course Vidomina.
Finally. Oh, thank God it's you.
Even Wizardry 6 characters such as Bella.
Finally.
Thanks, Brenda.
Never arrive. Come.
And of course there's quite a few new NPCs, some of them really goofy. Sometimes the NPCs will give you really good information. There's quite a few dialogue improvements in Wizardry 8. with keywords being added automatically in simplified mode.
Now it'll
Some
cost you.
NPCs will even use extortion,
Good thinking, Mom.
and some just have annoying voices.
Come here. Hey, you're the guys who came in on that ship. Some.
For most beginners, this is the first NPC you're going to run across. Unless, of course, you're transferring from Wizardry 7 with a different beginning. If you run across a neutral NPC that isn't friendly, you have the ability to try to do something, either threaten, be friendly toward them, offer an item, or you could just outright attack them. Or you could cast a charm spell if you'd like. From a lot of NPCs you can buy a lot of items, potions and scrolls,
Today is perfume.
perfume. Yeah, that's right, perfume. Some sell really good equipment, but of course you have to pay a lot for them. A lot of the items that NPCs sell will regenerate over time, and sometimes there's a random set of possible items that a given NPC will sell. You can also buy spell books from some NPCs, which is a very good way to pick up spells in the game, because it's much harder to level up in Wizardry 8. The other cool thing is the game will actually tell you if you already have the spell, or if you can't learn it. If you use a spell book, it increases your magic points in that magic realm as well.
Jolly good. Oh, jolly good.
Spellbooks are very expensive, but again, this is a really good way to learn magic. With NPCs, you can usually sell certain categories of items. If they sell weapons, they'll usually buy weapons. The user interface even has a cool dialogue where you can control the quantity of items that you're either selling or buying. Some items have certain charges on them that cannot be recharged, so in order to do so you can sell it to an NPC and then buy it back. After talking with NPCs, normally your communication skill may improve. The communication skill is what determines how much you get for what you sell and how much things cost when you buy them. The Pickpocket command is back, and if you get caught, sometimes you'll be attacked.
What? Looks like a challenge.
You can also do something now called shoplift, where you can pick an exact item you want to steal. Really cool feature.
See you around. Present.
When you're dealing with NPCs, you can cast spells like Charm in order to charm them and improve your reputation with them. There's even a musical instrument that a bard can use to do the same thing. As you use these skills, they'll actually increase and it'll tell you after you leave the NPC. There's a mind read spell, which will tell you any secret in the person's mind. As you're out exploring, sometimes you'll run across NPCs, and your party members will notify you someone's in the distance. You'll also run into NPCs that want you to complete mini-quests, or I'm going to call them non-essential quests. You, of course, always get a reward. Experience and normally gold or certain items. It's a great way to get an extreme amount of experience boosted.
I can't. Soldiers, I owe you my thanks.
And the two main types of NPCs you'll be helping for the majority of experience are the Impani and Trang. And of course they're at odds with each other, so you have to decide which side you want to be on.
Compiling.
Okay.
Yes,
Very well.
Russia.
That much better, Dad.
Now, you can recruit what's called RPCs, or recruitable player characters. You can have up to 2 in your party. There's a wide variety, and they each have their own professions and race, of course. Some of them will whine when you go to certain areas, but they don't want to be there. And other times they won't even go to a given area.
My entrance to location, Rat Pack's away camp.
No, boys, I know what's up ahead here. Just before.
And if you release them from your party, you can normally get them back.
You know what, boys?
Sometimes they return to their original location, and other times they stay where you released them. Depends on the NPC and where you are. Of course, they give back all their equipment to the party once you do release them. Normally they have one special item that they won't depart with. Certain NPCs will treat you differently depending on the RPCs that are in your party or were in your party. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot of areas in the game that are really cool to look at but aren't necessary in order to complete. It's just a huge world ready to be explored. Sometimes you'll find riddles that you have to answer in order to get certain bonuses.
I am each one and yet still more. All you've known, seen, and done before. Tell me, what am I?
But I don't want to spoil anything here. You can even log into certain computer systems at given times.
Enter password. Display data.
The fact that the game is so non-linear and you get to choose which quests you want to work on, they're completely optional, is fantastic. But Wizardry is a lot of combat, so let's get started.
Aye, we can crush them like worms.
As you begin combat, normally your characters or an RPC will say something about the level of difficulty of the monsters you're facing.
Okay.
And as you give commands to your party members, they'll say certain things which sometimes are very entertaining. Messages during combat appear at the lower center part of the screen, and by default they don't give you much details. You can turn on verbose combat messages, and then it'll actually say what type of weapon is being used. That's a pretty cool feature. So now, as you're fighting enemies and you're selecting and choosing groups to attack, sometimes with spells, you'll notice that the whole group will turn green as you select. There's also a nice little feature of these colored triangles appearing above the enemies. The color of the triangle matches with the color of your party members. For example, in our case, my bard is orange. Therefore, if I see an orange triangle over one of the enemies, that is the target for my bard. There's also the concept of active, in range, and in view. If you look closely, there's 3 numbers. The first number is for active, meaning the enemy is actually conscious or able to act. In range means you can reach them. And in view means you can actually see them. Now as enemies move back and forth on the battlefield, you will see the little arrows appearing above their head. Really cool feature. If a given member in action can't reach a given group or enemy, it'll highlight as red. If they can, it'll be green. Of course, there's melee attacks, and you can get multiple swings and or multiple attacks as you progress. Only physical weapons are impacted by armor, or the armor class of the enemy. Magic, of course, relies on resistances of the enemy. Some enemies have extremely high armor class. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a party formation where you can put party members in given quadrants. Since the party travels together as one big blob, that determines how likely it is for a given party member to be attacked and for them to build attack. This adds a whole new realm of strategy to Wizardry 8. For example, here we have an extended weapon. There's 4 ranges: close, extended, throwing/sling, and shooting. So thrown weapons you just equip in your hands. You can equip one in each hand actually. And it still has a pretty good range. Interestingly enough, some magical items that you use in combat use the throwing skill, even though technically they're not thrown. The little weapon or hand icon next to a given party member indicates the type of weapon or range that's going to be used that round. Now, certain shooting weapons use missiles, such as a crossbow using bolts. And of course, shooting range can go a lot farther, but depending on how far away the enemy is and your skill level, you may miss more often. There's even modern weapons that hit an area, such as a rocket launcher. And then of course we have artifacts such as cracker sticks, which do magic type damage. Some items have a charge on them. They show up as a light blue colored to show you how many charges are left. And once it reaches 0, usually the item still remains. It just can't be used anymore. The entire party must move together, so you can either walk or run. And as you're issuing that type of command, the enemy may sometimes interrupt your progress. If you're running, you can actually bounce into the enemies and be pushed backwards as well. In order to flee from a battle, you can also use the run command. You have to be able to get so far away from the enemy before they'll actually leave you alone. Sometimes it's not really possible, other times it is. Once you do issue a walk or a run command, you pretty much lose most of your turns, if not all of your turns, for that round.
Too bad. Is there anything we can do about it?
You can check out the statistics or resistances of given monsters depending on your mythology level. Sometimes you're provided a lot of information if your level's high, and other times not very much. In fact, sometimes you may not even know the correct name of the monster. You can normally spot enemies on the radar map before you actually have to fight them, so that it gives you a good chance to figure out your strategy before reaching them. Now there's single target type spells, which just do straight damage or have certain types of effects. And then there's area of effect. With area of effect, you have to actually move a pointer around to the specific area you want to hit. Casters have a huge advantage in long distance fighting. There's also spells that will have effects that happen every round, such as Firestorm. As the round ends, the enemy takes damage. There's also cone-based spells, which spread out wider as they go farther. Now, magic and spells will never miss the enemy. Conversely, you can never hit your own party members or friendly NPCs directly with spells. Because you're now in a true 3D world, the strategy you use for certain spells makes a big difference. Also, when you cast a spell, just like Wizardry 6 and 7, you choose the power level before doing so. Based on your skill level, it determines your chance of success and how much damage or effect it'll have. Many spells come from Wizardry 7, but there are some new ones as well. And the Draken still has the ability to breathe acid. The Holy Water spell does damage only to undead creatures.
With pleasure.
Very well.
And then there's group attack spells where you can attack an entire group. And we have summoning spells. They do massive amounts of damage, by the way, when they hit the enemy. You can do debuff spells such as Terror or Blind. If you blind enemies, sometimes they'll fail to act or they'll run away. Which incidentally works well if you're in an enclosed room, because then they're just targets. You can have target practice. If you're out in the open, it can become frustrating because they'll run away and then you have to chase them down. The game has so many cool design elements. For example, if an enemy is blinded and you're not in combat, and they're the only one there, you can actually stalk them and follow them around and they'll have no clue. Or you could just attack them and kill them. There's paralyzed type spells such as web, and then you can get artifacts that also cast spells, like this sleeping powder. One of the coolest things in this game is there's a lot more scrolls, potions, and powders to use. Weapons themselves can have special effects, such as fear or knocking the enemy unconscious. Speaking of which, when someone's unconscious or paralyzed, they take double damage from melee attacks. Even hands and feet can knock an enemy out. Or you can paralyze them with a stun rod. It is more difficult to grind in Wizardry 8 because the enemies actually scale up as you become more powerful. Because of this, some spells become more advantageous later on, such as Insanity, because it can cause the enemy to turn on each other, or the straight turncoat spell, which guarantees they will attack each other if they fail their resistance. And of course, the instant kill returns. It's no longer called the Kirajitsu skill, it's now just called critical hit. But instant kills don't happen as often because of the scaling of the enemies. Instant kill depends on the level of the enemy. So it isn't nearly as overpowered as it is in the other games. There's certain weapons that also have a critical hit chance. And of course there's instant death spells.
Taken care of.
Combat tends to go to much higher rounds in Wizardry 8, so the cloud-based spells can be more beneficial.
Much better.
You can observe the number of kills your party members have had, just like in previous Wizardries. Of course, one party member may do the majority of the damage, and then the one that kills it gets the credit. There's buff type things such as potions of haste,
Very well.
speed up your party, and you can use scrolls of resurrection right in the middle of combat.
Sure.
You will end up resurrecting your party members much more often in Wizardry 8. The Bard is back with all their musical instruments. In fact, they're much more powerful in Wizardry 8. The reason is because most of these musical instruments are guaranteed finds.
I'm on it.
There's also some random ones in addition. The music skill is really all that's required in order to play instruments. So a party member that changes profession, who was previously a bard, can still use the instruments. But some of them require a certain music skill level, which will not increase once you change professions. The bard no longer can cast spells, but that really doesn't matter since there's so many instruments. They are very overpowered, especially since it only uses stamina. And again, most of them are a guaranteed drop. For example, here we did a mass paralyze on the enemy, and then we can just use area of effect spells to blast him down. In fact, the bards are so powerful, I did one party with 2 bards, and we did just fine.
I'm on it.
Yes.
The Dulcimer of Mending does a heal all, and you can use as much as you want outside of combat. Now if you try to cast a spell that's outside of range, the member will just skip their turn for that round. Some enemies just do melee type attacks, and in fact sometimes it can have multiples and hit multiple members. You can use the defend command, and there's a new one called protect, which allows a party member to actually take the hit for another adjacent party member. Now you can only do it if they're in a quadrant next to you, based on the layout of combat. But it's very handy when trying to protect the casters if enemies surround you. If you're more than one quadrant away, it won't work.
I regret that will be impossible.
That is impossible, even for me.
So enemy can also shoot projectiles at you. And of course you'll run across spellcasters. Some will cast debuffs against the party, or buff their own party members. They can even heal themselves. Enemy casters can fizzle and fail to cast. And some have special abilities in addition to casting spells.
Oh no!
Certain points in the game, some enemies are very, very difficult. They can just tear up your party, depending on the composition of your party. There's various points in which attackers with physical weapons will do better, and there's points in the game where magic users will do better.
Life force draining.
There's a lot of conditions you and the enemy can have.
I can't see.
If you get paralyzed, by the way, and you fall unconscious, you can take 3 times damage instead of just 2 times the damage. It's really funny too when your characters get silenced and they try to make noises. Some enemies can cast spells like Draining Cloud, which will drain hit points and stamina and magic points all at the same time. There's a new status type of hit points drained, in which you can use a special potion to remove. At certain points in the game, it's just brutal. But just to show you how much detail has gone into this game, certain weapons require strength at a certain level to use it. And there's a spell called Hex that can lower your character's attributes. Right in the middle of combat, you can actually lose the ability to use a certain weapon you had equipped. There's many, many different monsters in a battle at times. In fact, they can even summon more.
The enemy is without end.
It's pretty impressive the number of unique monster groups that can exist. The game uses auto camera rotation in a panning manner by default, but you can actually turn this off. So the camera will stay in whatever position you move it to manually, no matter what's happening during combat. So you can even hear with surround sound off to the left side if there's enemies to the left of the party being attacked. There's also a snap option for the auto camera rotation, and this just speeds up the process of moving to the action. Personally, I like the panning mechanism the best. Now when you first start casting spells, of course you're going to fizzle a lot, because you just do not have the spell ability.
It will be done.
In fact, you can even backfire your spells.
Oops. Not
It can be very dangerous in the beginning.
I have wounds.
You did have some training, yes?
It's really funny some of the quotes that your party members say too during a backfire.
It is a sign that the pride will soon be led by
Musical instruments can be backfired as well. and of course it can cause mass chaos amongst your ranks. For example, Turncoat against your party members can be extremely dangerous. There's a spell called Eye for Eye, which will work even against musical instruments. If you get poisoned, you'll take damage every round until it's cured. In outside combat, every 5 seconds the poison is activated. There's also different levels of poison.
I feel somewhat restored.
Cloud-based spells like Toxic Cloud can poison, cause nausea, and unconsciousness after each round.
That's a relief.
The Armor Melt spell is back, but it doesn't seem to have as much impact this time around. Also, I couldn't conclude whether casting it multiple times actually had an impact or not. It didn't seem to. This slime had one of the highest armor classes, and it really didn't make much of a difference.
Destroy. Destroy.
Now you've probably already noticed, but the way you can tell negative conditions is to look above the head of the enemy, and you'll see little circles. You can also right-click on them and it'll give the details as well. The text box is pretty cool. You can actually scroll to see messages that you've missed. Terrain and structure can play a big aspect of the strategy as well. For example, here a tree was blocking our way, so we had to kind of move over in order to reach. You can also use group type attack spells to hit enemies around a corner. It can be really fun to hear the chain reaction. Now, of course, this assumes that you want the terrain to be blocking the enemy, because sometimes they may have casters and you may be all fighters. Sometimes the enemy may be perched high above you and showering you with missile weapons. You can, of course, reach them with missile weapons or with certain spells. The game is a little bit quirky sometimes, though. For instance, if you're dealing with things that are blocking your vision, like this fence, I'm not able to cast any kind of area type spell through there, because when I try to, it presents the mechanism to move it, and I can't get it to go through the fence. However, any type of area of effect that hits anything in vision, or that you attack with a group or missile weapon, works fine. And in this weird case, I saw some enemies below on this bridge down there and I couldn't attack them. I surprised them by hitting the combat option, but I can't aim at any of them. It seems fairly inconsistent. Now the enemy will make a certain sound when you hit him depending on the weapon and armor type, which is pretty cool. Another cool feature of this game is as the enemy becomes more and more damaged, you can tell by their appearance. They get bloodied and sometimes look to have broken appendages. There's other cool effects too, like being underwater. If you look closely, you can see it zooming in and out slowly as though you really were underwater. Flying enemies just float there, motionless if they get paralyzed or webbed. There's nice little touches like the ground shaking as these monsters approach you, or the belly animation when you hit this guy. Some monsters will cast spells like Body of Stone. which will greatly increase their armor class and greatly decrease your chance of being able to penetrate. There's several set encounters in the game, and they are very difficult. This guy's name is Don Barlone. He's one of the hardest in the game. There's other cool monsters like this Soul Eater. Or El Dorado. And there's a woman you'll meet eventually named Alcedexis.
Tune up. It's time to play.
Very suggestive name. Since the encounters are set, it depends on your level when you fight them and how easy or difficult it'll be. Sometimes, if you come back to an area later and hold off on beating it, it's super easy. If you try to go to that area early, you'll get your butt kicked. Now your party can get attacked from behind if you're surrounded, which is why it's so important to have the quadrant set up properly for your party members. Plus the protect mechanism I spoke of earlier also helps tremendously. The top quadrant's the front of the party and the bottom quadrant's the back.
Taken care of.
You can use the Shift W key to swap your primary weapons to secondary weapons for all your party members. If you do end up getting surrounded and have the Ring of Fire spell, that's handy to cast. It'll cause damage to everyone around you each round they remain there. Shields have been drastically improved in Wizardry 8, which is fantastic. Basically, they not only increase your armor class, but they can block melee attacks entirely, depending on your shield level. Outside combat, the upper right corner shows all the active spells you can have. X-Ray, Shadowhound, Missile Shield, Magic Screen, Light, Enchanted Blade, Detect Secrets, Chameleon, and Armor Plate. You're notified when one of the spells expires by a sound and text. There's also some combat-only protection spells like Element Shield and Soul Shield.
Very well.
Combat-only spells that affect the party show below the topmost bar. Now, Missile Shield is an amazing spell if you're fighting any ranged attackers. There's also single character buff spells such as Superman. And you'll see a little icon appear next to the character in the status area. Now during combat, eventually you'll run out of ammo, and your party member notifies you. The equip option must be used. You cannot just go into the inventory. So you have to explicitly use equip on the character, and then during that round you'll be able to equip whatever you want. Grab your ammo and put it in your other hand. You can split ammo or join ammo, depending on your encumbrance, to avoid overload. Interestingly enough, the blunderbuss every once in a while had to be loaded manually and wouldn't auto-reload if it reached 0. There's even an item called the Boomerang Shuriken, which you can throw over and over and it'll never run out of ammunition. As you kill monsters, sometimes they'll drop items on the ground, and you can just reach out in front of you and grab them right in the middle of combat. A little bit goofy, but kinda cool. I haven't mentioned this yet, but you can adjust the monster movement speed, combat speed, and text display speed to speed it up. I had everything at a max when I was playing. Even still, it can be quite tedious and slow at times. And of course, I have not yet talked about continuous combat, which tries to make it as real-time as possible. So in the bottom right corner, you can see a red circle. If you click the red circle, it'll stop continuous combat. But the way it works is you can actually issue commands during the round as it's going on. And if you happen to change the command before that character gets to act, it will switch their action, which is really cool. Now trying to run or cast a spell or do anything which pops up a dialogue will pause. And then once you choose the action, continuous combat will resume. I only used it during easy battles. Sometimes there'll be some NPCs that'll help you during battle. For example, here these Trennies are helping me fight these plants. And they can be really good at times. Some even are spellcasters. Sometimes they use artificial ignorance, like casting eye for an eye against non-casters. Your buff spells will work on NPCs, which is cool. And sometimes they try to get a little fancy and do a shot right through his other teammate's legs. It's funny hearing the enemy getting pummeled in the distance by the friendly NPCs. You can accidentally fire on the NPCs, however. In fact, they can accidentally fire on you as well. The only exception to that are spells. Spells will always hit the enemy and never hit the NPCs. You can cast helpful spells on the NPCs. You can even heal them or cure them.
Very well.
In fact, if one gets paralyzed during combat, after combat they're still paralyzed, you can cure them. Some helpful spells can't reach them, depending on their range, however. Now sometimes the NPCs can get quite annoying. For example, here the battle is ended, and I have to wait for all these NPCs to finish their moves. And if they're fleeing, it can take them forever. Yep. Now sometimes you also get shoved around by NPCs as you're just trying to walk through an area. And you always yield, you always get pushed back, which is kind of annoying. There's a lot of funny quotes in this game. Especially when they get silenced or they're insane.
They were no match for us.
And as you kill the enemies, sometimes you'll issue battle cries of victory. After you win a battle, you of course get experience points, and your skills will improve depending on how much you use them. It's a really cool feature. And if you had enough experience, you may level up.
Ah, beauty. Me skills be improving.
My inborn skills continue to evolve.
And it shows the personality of the party members.
It's pleasant to advance. True happiness comes only through meditation.
Sometimes killing really tough enemies will result in a ridiculous amount of experience.
Delightful.
How exciting. I think I'm improving.
Oh, this is great.
The level up process is much improved compared to Wizardry 7. There's no randomness here. You get 6 bonus points to assign to your attributes, and you get to choose. If you're eligible for any new spells, you can choose them as well. or wait for a further level up to get more powerful ones. Next, you choose your skills. You have a total of 9 points to distribute, and you can only distribute up to 3 on the same skill. As I mentioned earlier, grinding in this game is much more difficult because you can't just rely on random encounters. It takes much longer to meet a random enemy. Because of this, you'll treasure your level ups in Wizardry 8. Normally, a character will max out at 75 for a given skill, unless it's their professional skill. Once an attribute reaches 100, it unlocks an expert skill. In this case, Power Strike, because our strength was 100. These are the same skills that existed in Wizardry 7. How they unlock are obviously different. So we have Reflection, which is Dexterity. Iron Will, which is Piety. Eagle Eye, which is Senses. Power Cast, which is Intelligence. There's also Iron Skin and Snake Speed. Now RPCs in your party level up just like you do. And in fact, if you release them and get them back again later, they will still keep their level ups. Sometimes they're a little different. For example, this android monk doesn't get to cast spells. As I mentioned, as you use skills, they actually increase, which is really nice. So the more you use, the more they go up. You can also find in the game sometimes target dummies. It's pretty rare, but when you run across them, you can use them to your advantage in order to level up various skills. Here we're shooting them down and casting spells. You get 0 experience, but you get the skills level up. There's really cool effects sometimes, like when a slime dies and has an item inside it. Or how spirits just disappear. And after a battle, sometimes items will just litter the battlefield. And then it's just a free-for-all, running around picking them up. Your artifact skills will actually increase too as your party members try to identify them automatically. Some monsters you kill drop a bag, which means there's multiple items in there. It's funny sometimes the types of items they drop. Like a spirit dropping a lance. Some enemies will leave behind essence of their type of remains, and you can use those later to craft special items.
Spotted a creature.
So sometimes as you see enemies approaching, your party members will give you notice.
Anything could happen.
Plus you can see them approaching on the mini-map in the bottom left. In fact, look at these monsters in the background here. You can see them up on that cliff top. And as I wait, you can see them coming toward me.
I'm burning to kill.
Your party can camp or rest anywhere in the game. Sometimes though you want to try to find an isolated area just in case monsters try to attack you. Of course, this is how you heal and recover after battle. If you have special items in your party, such as magic regeneration items, you can recover very quickly. And sometimes you may be poisoned or have some other condition you need to rest to remove.
That's more like it.
You gotta be careful though, sometimes you can end up dying from poisons if you're resting.
Something useful?
There's a lot of healing potions in the game, so you can always use those to recover your health as well. Or spell point restoration items like a mana stone. You can also recover stamina. Here I cast an auto-cast level 8 stamina spell, and it'll heal you until you either run out of magic points or you fully recover.
Found something!
There's also regeneration items, like here this is for females only and recovers their stamina.
I measure our progress in bodies.
It makes the recovery very quick. There's various levels of poison removal. Here we used a level 3 potion.
Very well.
Of course, you can cure paralysis with scrolls or potions. Here we're disease, so we need to cast Cure Disease. Some spells have the ability to auto-cast, like Heal Wounds, which is really nice. Saves a lot of tedium. Now the difference between scrolls and potions are scrolls you can usually choose the target, plus it requires artifact skill and they're usually more powerful. Potions, the person has to drink themselves. Now you can always try to flee from monsters, and sometimes you can get out of battle by hiding behind something like this waterfall. However, the monsters know you're there, so if you wait long enough, there's a good chance they will creep in on you.
Got my music ready to get 'em.
The chase begins. Attack!
There's also camouflage in this game. Camouflage helps either you or the enemy be able to surprise each other. The scouting skill can greatly increase your chance of finding camouflaged enemies as you're walking along. It affects the range quite a bit. You can be surprised by monsters while trying to camp, especially if you don't have Shadowhound cast. The scouting ability of the ranger helps with this too, though. You can also surprise the enemy by clicking the sword in the bottom of the screen. Now what's interesting about this is you need to actually do something to the enemy if you're casting beneficial spells on your party members. Otherwise what happens is you cast all these spells and then the combat automatically ends. And then they're wasted because they're combat only spells. And sometimes if you are a little too overzealous and jump in to surprise them too early, they're too far away. You can't actually reach them with anything.
Impossible.
The right way to do it is to surprise the enemy and then hit at least one with something. You'll get a free round of attacks. One other quick combat thing to mention, if you kill enemies of a certain race, it can reduce your rating with that entire race. So you have to be kind of careful who you attack at times. You'll come across a lot of locked areas in the game, so the lockpicking skill is very useful. It's really fun how it works too. There's some tumblers that you have to manipulate. And I increased the speed of this video just to show you how long it takes for your skill to increase as you do this. It takes a long time. Eventually it is possible. It's more tedious than anything. If you have a caster that has the knock-knock spell, that can help greatly.
Yes.
It suspends some of the tumblers so that you can lockpick the rest. You can also try to force the lock, which just uses strength and stamina.
Yes.
Present.
The nice thing is it tells you your chance of being able to force it. Now some of the treasure chests you come across will be unlocked and untrapped. but many times they'll be trapped. And then you can either disarm or cast a helpful spell like Divine Trap to make you more efficient. Basically, it increases your chance of success. So the way it works when you stumble across a chest like this is you have to first inspect it. Depending on your skill level, it'll either have some green boxes or some yellow ones. If it's green, it means you're guaranteed those are the mechanical devices you need to manipulate to open the chest. It still does not guarantee that you're going to be successful at it. If it's yellow, you don't know for sure.
Excellent.
Now once you find some items, you're presented with a dialogue. You can either select individual ones and assign them to specific characters, or you can do the party take all. The right side of the inventory screen shows all the party items. The entire party shares that encumbrance load. Unfortunately, there's a lot of garbage treasure in this game. You can work your butt off for something and then just end up with something that's not very useful. The reason this happens at times is because some of the random treasure chests have their items set when you enter an area, so you can't quit and reload the game to try to get better treasure like you could in the previous Wizardry. There are a lot of set items in the game though, so they're guaranteed. If you can't successfully assay an unknown item, you can always cast the identification spell. There's also an area in the game where you can fill these empty bottles with this black liquid and it actually makes cherry bombs. Pretty cool. But getting back to traps, there are all kinds of them in this game. There's an anti-magic trap, lowers your magic points. There's a heat wave, which destroys potions and scrolls that you may have. Runes, curses, even a guardian, which makes an elemental appear that you have to fight. Sometimes when you try to disarm a trap and you fail, the trap will still be on there. You'll also run across a lot of locked doors in this game. Sometimes the number of tumblers they have is just ridiculous. That's where you'll have to cast knock-knock spells to help you, or use knock-knock items. You can also be interrupted right in the middle of picking locks and get attacked. You can also be interrupted while trying to unlock a treasure chest. Watch the upper left corner here. How cool is that? As I mentioned before, each character class now has something unique about it. The Lord, for example, has health regeneration, which means his hit points come back as though he had a +1 hit point regeneration item. He also gets skill bonuses. Alchemists make random potions while the party camps. The Bishop can dispel undead and remove all cursed items. Mages get 5% bonus to all magic resistance. Psionics are fearless and have mental condition immunity. The monk is the best with martial arts, has natural damage resistance, and they can be unaffected by blindness. The bard not only has the music skill, but also improves the healing rate at camp time. Samurai is fearless and has what's called a lightning strike. It's rare, but when it happens, they get a ridiculous number of attacks. The ninja can actually get critical hits when it throws an item, the only one to do that. And it also has an auto-penetrate ability. No matter how high the enemy's armor class is, it goes right through it. The ranger can get critical hits from shooting range, which incidentally doesn't use the critical hit skill. It actually uses ranged combat to determine that. And as I mentioned earlier, rangers automatically search all the time. The priests can dispel undead like the bishops, but they can also pray for a miracle, which basically has a random benefit during combat. I didn't find it too useful because it was random, so I couldn't really control it. Sometimes it'd be Guardian Angel, sometimes Bless. It would restore your stamina, and sometimes it didn't even work. It says your prayers go unanswered. The Turn Undead ability is very useful, however. The priest can do it once per combat. As long as the undead's within range, it can do a good amount of damage and even sometimes paralyze them. Not to mention it has a cool effect.
With pleasure.
And the rogue is finally useful. It gets a backstab ability which can do double damage to enemies. Not to mention they're the best at picking locks. But fighters got the biggest boost. They have Berserk ability, which can do double damage, but makes them take extra damage if they get hit. They also have stamina regeneration, and can even knock enemies unconscious. Look at that damage, 164. But the new star of the show is the Gadgeteer, a brand new character class for Wizardry 8. They have what's called an Omni Gun, which has all kinds of different attachments that can be placed on it as it gets upgraded as the character levels up. It's a shooting weapon that can fire all kinds of different ammunition depending on what level you have. Here we're shooting arrows with it because we have the upgrade. It also gives all kinds of special conditions to the enemy. Sometimes it can blind them, paralyze them, and do all kinds of different things.
With pleasure.
The Gadgeteer also has an engineering ability, which essentially allows them to cast magic spells by using items. It's similar to how the Bard just uses stamina in order to cast magic spells. Here we created a lure with the lava lamp. There's also items that have charges, like duct tape can cast Paralyze. Playing as the Gadgeteer makes you become a scavenger, trying to find these special items that you can then merge to create the more powerful engineered items.
Oh, now this one is a keeper.
Here we created a microwave ray.
With pleasure.
Strobe light can have random effects like prismic missile.
Great.
Here we created an item that can cast the Eye for an Eye spell. It only has so many charges though, so you'd have to sell it to an NPC and buy it back if you want to recharge. The microwave ray is also extremely powerful. It's basically the boiling blood spell. I love the suspense with using this item.
With pleasure.
Now, you can fizzle with these items just like bards can with their instruments. Only it says you have technical difficulties. They can also create items like a double crossbow by merging various parts. In fact, even a triple crossbow is possible. If a character changes classes, they'll still be able to use certain skills like music. However, they can only use it at the level that the instrument allowed. Same with alchemy. You can still merge and create potions using the alchemy skill, even if you've changed classes or you're not an alchemist. But the special properties and abilities that belong to a specific profession will be lost if you change your class. By the way, you can only make certain types of potions based on the skill level of your alchemy. You can even find a Gadgeteer RPC in case you want to try it out with transferred characters. Now, one of the coolest things in this game is you can replace a character in the middle of the game. Yep, that's right. You don't want that character anymore? you can create a brand new one no matter where you're at. That is awesome. Because of the exponential nature of experience points in determining when you will level up, it actually ends up not being that bad if you have to replace a character even mid-game. For example, if you find the Cane of Corpus, which only allows fairy ninjas, and you don't have a fairy in your party, well, you could always get rid of a different character and start over at level 1. It won't take too long and they'll be pretty much caught up with the rest of the party. As I said before, when you change classes in this game, it keeps track of your previous levels. Here, for example, I have a fighter who is level 3 and a bard level 18. You can change back to the previous classes as well, or you can have multiples, 3, 4 plus. But your overall level is the accumulation of all of the levels. Now just a few loose ends here. You can flip back and forth with the text area for general text, combat text, and dialogue text. If while you're moving you hold down the shift key on the keyboard, you can run instead of walk, even outside of combat. There's also all kinds of options with the audio. You can also control graphic options. And as most modern games, you can reassign keyboard commands. It's nice just being able to see what the hotkeys are. Wizardry 8 also still has cursed items, which once equipped cannot be removed, without the remove curse spell or a bishop. If you try to swap equipment to the alternative while it's equipped, it won't let you. As I said earlier, the way treasure chests work is a little bit different because it sets based on what level you are when you enter an area. You get a lot of repetitive items in this game because of the random nature. Now there is a cool ability to make custom items by bringing certain NPCs various ingredients. Here we created this Ebon staff.
You've returned. The Beast Slayer axe is complete.
Here's a Beast Slayer axe. At some point you'll be going underwater.
It seems that our destiny awaits us below the waves. I just hope we come back to the surface again.
And it has details like not being able to cast fire-related spells successfully underwater, but you can cast other types of spells. You'll run across teleporters in different areas, teleporting in the same region or sometimes even to a completely different area. And two of the coolest new spells in this game is Set Portal and Return to Portal. Each caster can have a separate area in which they can teleport. So it makes it really nice to have various classes that can cast this spell, and actually all magic users can get it eventually. Sometimes you'll hear a creepy sound, which basically is letting you know that something dangerous is right around the corner.
Everyone ready to fight?
How cool is that? Remember earlier I told you that there were some non-essential areas you can explore? Well, there's some magical runes that you can do certain things in order to get into a special Easter egg dungeon. In fact, there's 2 of these dungeons in the game. Look at that. How cool is that? Now some of the set monsters or random monsters, and for that matter, are extremely difficult. Makes the game very challenging. In fact, I never really found myself getting bored with these battles. That's one of the nice things about the progression of the enemies getting harder as you get more powerful.
A creature approaches.
There's some creepy rogues outside this window. And it was pretty funny because I waited around for quite a few hours to see what would happen. And in the morning, they were still there, stalking me. There's a lot of kind of glitchy things with the graphics. Like here I'm shooting through the floor at an enemy above. Or here I shoot all the way up this cliff for an instant kill. Most of the comedy in this game was incidental. Like this NPC sucker punching the enemy behind the door. Or this poison Dupani sliding as he gets poisoned. Or these Umpani fleeing after all the enemy are already dead. You can see them in the distance. Or, once again, the Umpani accidentally shooting and hitting their teammates in the back. There is some intentional comedy, although it is quite rare compared to Wizardry 6 and 7.
Halt! Stop right there! Are you carrying any flammable devices or hazardous material?
No matter how you answer his questions, he has the same response.
Convicted of a crime here or on any other planet? And interesting. Have you ever had or do you plan to have?
Sometimes you'll get harassed by ratkins.
We figured you might need a little protection. After all, the Mook would probably be plenty ticked if they found out you,
But my favorite is the Dark Savant group.
You won't be disappointed.
You cannot escape the Dark Savant. We know you have the Chaos Molari.
I see a creature, friends.
Your alliance with the Mook is ended. We have destroyed them.
Liar. Not pulling anything over me.
We bring you good news. Vi Domina is dead. Now we plan to kill you.
I don't like to call anyone a liar, but...
Speaking of Vi Domina, WTF. Since when did she do martial arts? I did run across quite a few bugs. This one was a terrible one.
Don't be putting your hands on everything you like, okay? That's mine.
If you try to move her equipment, she normally complains and won't let you take it.
Don't be putting your hands on
But I accidentally
everything
dropped
you
it on
like,
someone
okay?
else's party member and I
That's
couldn't
mine.
even exit the screen. I also saw this Android screw up where the dialogue wasn't proper. It was saying things that didn't make sense in this context. And, once again, I could not exit.
Life forms exterminated. Life form exterminated. Begin recognition scan. Object found. Identity. Dark Savant. Mission. Exterminate all life. Assume all power. Mission aborted.
This would be very detrimental if you were playing the Iron Man game.
Object. Item.
So the only way I could deal with this was to actually attack this NPC.
Victory.
Then after I killed her, it was all back to normal. There's a lot of glitchy graphics though, with hit detection or collision detection not working. Here I climb all the way down this rope to be right in the middle of a Hogar.
This battle will be short and simple.
Just a little bit glitchy. There's also graphics redraw issues with the background. You can see it drawing as you're approaching. Or monks that can hit way beyond what the graphic shows. Another weird glitch was sometimes the NPCs would be blocking a door, so I couldn't get out. So as I tried to get past them, suddenly he disappears, only to have teleported back to his original position. This happened to me twice. There's also glitchy graphics, like I said earlier. You can shoot through trees or objects that should not be possible. I also found a really weird summoning bug,
The chase grows hotter.
where the enemy summoned this fire elemental, but he got stuck in the ground, and I couldn't even target him. It shows that he's there, but I had to kill all the other monsters first.
Blocked. Blocked.
Finally, he just disintegrated on his own.
That inspires me, boys.
Now watch this WTF moment.
Potential danger here.
This will be good practice.
Chaos Cube. Okay, let's see what happens.
Very well.
I told you so. I even witnessed a Trini hitting himself. WTF. I've also noticed these Umpani sometimes like to walk in slow motion and get in the way and be annoying. Very bizarre. And sometimes the enemy will just kind of run back and forth randomly and not make any progress until they've used up all their movement for that round. In fact, sometimes they can do it so much that they end up falling unconscious. Fail. One of the worst, though, was I was in this area, just walking around exploring. Next thing I know, I fell through the world.
A creature approaches.
And I had one incident of a crash to desktop. It only happened one time with over 100 hours of gameplay, though. So that's not too bad. So, in closing, what did I think about Wizardry 8? Even with all the glitchiness that I discussed previously, and the few bugs that I ran across, it should be apparent that this game is an absolute masterpiece. As lead designer, Brenda Brathwaite had a huge undertaking to follow in the footsteps of David W. Bradley, who's an absolute genius game designer. And all I can say is she did an amazing job. She took his world, she took his vision, and extended it, and even improved upon it. Extremely difficult thing to do. So I cannot express strongly enough how impressed I am with this game. The whole purpose of a role-playing game is for you to play along and feel as though you are in the role of the game. And Wizardry 8 accomplishes that completely. Your party members speaking and showing their personality, you never feel like you're alone. You feel like you're journeying with a real party. the fact that the enemies progress as you do, while some people don't like that, I loved it. It was always challenging. I always had to think about strategy. And while the NPCs were a little bit lacking, especially compared to some games like Ultima 6, the planning, combat, and strategy, and in fact the game world itself, makes up for that. The non-linear aspect of this game is tremendous.
Experience.
The fact that you can customize your characters exactly the way you want without the randomness is also excellent. You get to choose which side you want to team up with, Impani or Trang, or neither. You get to decide how to lead this band of adventurers, and you get to listen to them the whole time, good and bad. You get to explore this creepy world. And with the game's multiple endings, you get to decide the fate of the universe. I hope you've enjoyed this journey with me through Wizardry 8. I'll see you next time.
I knew you would come here. You optimistic idiots. To think that your destinies knew gods.